Okay, and so today's date is March 9th in the year 2019. We are live on YouTube. So I am producing this program alone. The difference between programs like mine and other programs that you might see on YouTube is that I do this alone. And so it requires a lot of focus to get through the content. I don't know how long this video is going to be, but there's a couple subjects that I want to address with regards to solar flare EMP risk. First of all, there's a lot of people out there putting out warnings that they perceive that something is coming up in April. It's not just a few people. It's a lot of people. There's also predictive programming for an EMP situation. We need to talk about that a little bit because that type of scenario would be pretty bad. In fact, I'm concerned that if there was some sort of agenda to do something like that, that we could see when they bring the grid back, a type of government that we really don't want. There's also a lot of conspiracy theories about there being no sun, which I do not subscribe to. There's a lot of disinformation now that's on the internet. I have even found some fake news making fake predictions about the sun or predicting geomagnetic storms like a month in advance, like, not based on actual science. So there seems to be some sort of a deliberate effort to throw us off the trail. So the main difference, and I'm trying to do this with less light than normal, the main difference, obviously, between an EMP, that would be like an act of war or terrorism, versus an event coming from the sun, being that we're in a solar minimum, and who knows how low it's going to go, but at some point in the next year or a little bit longer than that or shorter, there may be an announcement that we're already in solar cycle 25. And so there's ways in which they look for signs that we're in a new cycle, and it's a change in magnetism. I want to pause, by the way, and thank Jared, Lee Ward, both of them in California. I want to thank my California audience. It seems there are more of you in California that are watching this, and maybe that's for a good reason. And, there's certain topics that are main topics of mine that you'll never see auto-suggested, and it's kind of interesting. And there's a lot of people out there that don't see the value. I was talking about this earlier in another podcast, in this type of content because it's assumed to be one thing when it's not. And I do believe that by talking about certain things, that spirit can even work through people. Sometimes spirit works through people and they help me. Sometimes I feel like my lifetime is spirit working through me to help some of you see what's coming. And there are certain moments in which the real zeitgeist, the real collective focus, if you will, at the same time for a lot of people. It may lead people to certain videos like mine that are discussing these things. So there's a lot of really relevant, let me steer this to the main topic tonight, how relationships between men and women, specifically, we're going to focus on that, but also just in general, would go through a type of a reset, major adulteration. And so when you look at the scientific information, coming example from people like Matthew Stein and others, you could check out the interview that I did with him. That is on my YouTube channel. You can go to the front of the page and click on popular uploads, and I'm sure you can find it somewhere there, or just type into the search bar Alex Ansary interviews Matthew Stein. And he wrote a book called When Disaster Strikes. And there's also a number of other prepper books that he bought. I actually have them put away in a box somewhere in Oregon. And so that is good information to have, survival information. But what would really change dramatically in such an event like a solar event? We're going to focus more on that than an EMP. We'll touch upon that briefly, though, but that's one of the worst case scenarios, along with a draconian deception from the government, a false, by the way, my cat gets really excited for some reason once I go live and hit record. It's pretty calm, like the rest of come on, kitty. Must be like the energy of your consciousness within this room. But there's a reason why I continue to discuss certain things, even if they're not popular, because I believe that lives are at stake. And I believe that by studying the changes in the sun, we're also investigating our own spirituality. If you have gone through solarmaxnews.com and you've looked at the ebook, you're probably aware that within the ebook, I talk about learning about the cycles within my own life. and how during certain periods in the solar cycle, like leaving the 1990s, going into 2000s, then we had an event that led us in these wars. There were certain major changes that I, in this body, was feeling. Now, not everybody identifies with feeling intense feelings and being super empathetic and sensitive to the energies around us. And a lot of people talk about that, but not necessarily in conjunction with heightened sensitivity around geomagnetic storms. And there are other people on YouTube, they're talking about, like earlier today, I was talking about bam, bam, going from one solar flare to another solar flare. One day we'll wake up and that'll be our reality. And there are other people in real time, like today, like the voice of that woman that I featured in a recent YouTube video on this channel, where she's talking about the sun and its impact on our spirituality, the pineal gland, things of that nature. They're picking up on several women out there that do YouTube channels about the sun, are picking up on the sun being very active. Now, I'm not seeing activity displayed at spaceweather.gov or spaceweather.com, but there are other websites where people can, that's probably where they're getting some of their information, pick up on the more minute changes in the geomagnetic field. So there's been some things reported like a activity at midnight, 1 o'clock, things of that nature. To make a long story short, there are signs that we are seeing increased activity. And this is the opposite of the whole the sun is dying meme, which is predominant. It almost seems like the algorithm, just like it promotes the far right, it almost seems like the algorithm promotes people that discuss the sun from a certain perspective. Because I think that we're going to see a big cycle in solar cycle 25. And over the long term, we could see a diminishing of the sun's activity, which plays a massive role in the civilization's reset. But these massive lows to highs can trigger certain things like crop failures. And for example, we're in a solar minimum. And we are experiencing a winter in which more snow is coming Monday. This is not like last year. You may notice that there is reports of snow and maybe record low temperatures. Actually, there's some science or articles claiming that we're dealing with record high temperatures this winter. And that is a little bit hard to believe. But we are seeing like large amounts of snow all throughout the United States and the world. And what a lot of people don't factor in is the influence of the sun. So most people think about the grid and they think about the climate with regards to the sun. People, for the most part, leave out the behavioral influence and other things. So let's now, after kind of a brief introduction, though, get you thinking a little bit about how your life would change. How would your neighborhood transform, the people in your neighborhood? Would there instantly, are you in the middle of a ghetto where a bunch of people are armed? Or how about some element of rural America where a bunch of people are armed? Is that necessarily safer? Ultimately, in the end, we can only control so much, right? We can only control so much. In the end, we need to let go and let God, some could say. And so I want to approach this from not a religious perspective, but a perspective of like, we can only do so much. Okay. And the more spiritual perspective is to understand that some things may happen for a reason. And ultimately, when we look at the future, we are looking at a reality to where we can go in any direction. But if we continue on the same course, military industrial complex, robotics, even the idea that there may be a robotic army underground, because if they do intend to stage a takedown, don't think that we're not going to see something really bizarre come about. And so there's been several channels that talked about the next couple of months. There's also people like AMTV that are opportunists. And then people like AMTV give the little guy that's trying to warn people about a big event a bad name. A lot of people see the AMTVs of the world and the Alex Joneses of the world, and they are not able to differentiate what they stand for from us. People like Christopher Green don't do their own research. And there is like a script of disaster fear porn that sells, baby. And sometimes it sells for them to talk about EMP. Sometimes it sells for them to talk about China and Russia. But just because some people are opportunists doesn't mean that those aren't relevant issues. Some people were never actually talking about those issues years ago, but they are now because they can't cover it up and they'll look bad if they don't cover the very basics. And so they'll sensationalize in order to get you to buy a backpack with a bunch of marked up prices. And I'm just here to tell you that there's changes, then disaster. Now, I want you to ask yourself, who is it that's really concerned about the grid going down? What type of entity? One could even describe our grid as an entity. I've talked about this before. Think about it like this grid of consciousness, and think about how many people are under mind control as a result of this grid. Let's start segueing hard into the relationships. So, a lot of people are balancing their relationships or living their relationships, these online mediums. And people would have to talk to each other. They would have to coordinate things like getting water and food and defending themselves from potential bandits if there were people that were going after people's resources in a community, kind of like, a community defense force. And there would likely be block to block in this area, those types of things where people are helping each other out in a disaster. There's going to be some areas, hopefully, and hopefully things wouldn't turn super criminal. The reality is just because you're out in the country or in the city, there's a lot of people that are super pro city when it comes to dealing with a grid down situation. We're talking about people that are like afraid of the country that will just use rhetoric and, poke fun at people that are willing to take the risks, even in some cases unarmed. I would caution everyone from thinking that it's just automatically safer to be in a city surrounded by a bunch of hungry people. I mean, that is, in my opinion, the very last place I would ever want to be in a situation where people were starving. And ultimately, I'm not very impressed with human nature. Right now, we have manipulations turning man against woman, woman against man, and in videos like I did years ago, which are still doing very well, good men leaving mainstream society, future ramifications for women's safety. And so there's a lot of mind control that seems to be deliberately maintained through the social media spectrum and through other forms of technology. It's almost as if it's like the hand needs to hold the ball underneath water. Otherwise, the ball would just pop up out of the water and would free itself from that type of oppression. The hand holding the ball under the water would be the ways in which technology alters our understanding of ourselves and others. It is not a traditional world. And we're not talking about traditional values, like traditional America. We're talking about like a traditional world where people had to speak to one another in order to get to know one another. It's not like going to go down. It's all going down on Facebook or in a chat room. Chat rooms are great, but we can do so much better with this type of technology. Facebook, YouTube, Discord. And for the most part, right? And I appreciate those of you that are here. I appreciate those that have contributed recently in order to help my car get back on its feet or the tires realign themselves. But this is a very different channel than a lot of other channels that are on YouTube. In fact, it'll recommend that you check out other content on the sidebar. But yet there isn't any real discussion about relationships and staying out of hating women or hating men. There's miscategorization. Artificial intelligence on YouTube seems to have, no offense intended to those that do suffer from it, but a form of Down syndrome. There seems to be a form of Down syndrome within this almighty Wizard of Oz algorithm that miscategorizes us, puts people in with the far right that aren't in with the far right, and sends the wrong people to me and doesn't send like the right people to me. So there's like a disconnect constantly with elements of the audience. So I appreciate those of you that I have retained over the years. Some of you have been watching for several years, and some people come and go. And so it's important that people like me exist and continue to exist on YouTube with regards to the solar conversation, because it's so much more than fear. When I gave my solar flare talk at Mark Passio's For Your Mind conference, in the first 3 minutes, a guy got up and marched out with sass. And it's like, just because we're starting our discussion talking about the Carantine event of 1859, Snowflake, you don't have to get triggered on that level thinking that I'm promoting the end of the world. Is it the end or is it the beginning? Because if that young man decided to sit in his seat longer, like an extra 5 minutes, he would have seen that at the beginning I'm saying that it's possible that what we're really seeing is a major concern from the powers that be about them losing their Tower of Babel crashing down. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoy this video. Share it. There is a couple other things that I need to mention within regards to this. Human sexuality also. There's a lot of addiction to digital things that turn people on. This includes their favorite celebrity media host. So in a grid down situation, whoa, all of a sudden there would be more value associated, and thank you very much, there would be more value associated to a man or a woman who is intelligent. All of a sudden, without all these phones working all the time, and by the way, ladies, if there is a grid down situation and your phone's still working, but there's rumors about some bad stuff going on, because what if it's not a solar thing? What if they just make the grid go out through some sort of a manufactured event? Your cell phones are tracking devices. There are other devices out there that will help you to track of, say, some lost luggage, GPS tracking devices. Great little tools if you're traveling, right? Why assume that the iPhones are not serving the same purpose? So accurately determining what actually caused the lights to go out is going to be very, very important. But don't assume that it's necessarily a conspiracy, because some people have a hard time believing that the sun does exist. Some people have a very hard time, and I think there's a reason for this, almost like a conspiracy. There seems to be an agenda to keep people in this type of a box, to where it's like the real psychosis or the real agenda is to steer them in a direction of thinking that the earth is flat or that there is no sun. And certain types of belief systems can condition people to then believing other insane things. It's a conditioning process. And there's other forms of conditioning processes like this where people are conditioned to believe the insane or the unbelievable and to doubt their own senses. And so if we have a spiritual connection with the sun, and this is more than the grid going out and maybe more about us activating, if someone's steered away from that type of centering, and we all have work to do, like clearing out ancestral garbage. Some of us have a lot more work to do because we have a lot more, maybe there's a little bit more history from different regions. And so there may be also like lots of streams of information coming through. And there can also be some other distorted information too that wants to stop us, maybe punish us, because we're not following like the slaves of our ancestors, following in some of their religions. I highly suspect I face certain challenges because I've bucked certain old world systems from all sides of my ancestry. So this solar energy, and also we need to go beyond the fear of the afterlife, but the relationships between humans are contaminated today with this all you can watch and consume technology. And some people are going to be more mindful than others with text messaging. So you're not being put down. But if you study digital addiction, if you study social media addiction, if you come to terms with the fact that there really is fake news on the left and the right, and that people are making their decisions from this, and it's like, we're not yet at this level that I can see where humans are working diligently that are alive today to reel in this disinformation and use these platforms for the very best purposes. It's like we're seeing an escalation of war rhetoric, an escalation of angry sentiments. And as we go into the early 2020s, so crossing 2020 into 2021, boom, we're starting to go into the solar maximum. If you remember the solar minimum to solar maximum of the last cycle, we were going into Occupy. But yet, how many people do you know have recognized where the solar cycle was as Occupy was beginning? That was the time in which I was leaving Portland, and Portland had a lot of funky energy at that time. And I knew it was time to get out. That 2012 was not the year, not because of a perception of the end of the world, but knowing that that was the period in which we were getting the most solar energy, and it was manifesting in our world. Portland was crazy at that time, and it just happened to be a coincidence that I was in Costilla County late 2012 into 2013, because that was the place for me. That was the place for me in the middle of 2013 for me to be at the Free Your Mind conference. And right on cue, there's an increase in solar flares and a few manufactured events, shootings. because in my ebook, I talk about the connection between possible manufactured events and solar peaks or geomagnetic storms, because people's emotions are up and they're easily like misdirected. Problem, reaction, solution. And this is something that we see time and time again. And at solarmaxnews.com, over time, I would like to start documenting the things that we are seeing during these geomagnetic storms. And so, it's not like life was perfect, right? And people talk about patriarchy, or they use different words to describe a world they say it was less fair. What I have to say is, at the very least, people got a chance to get to know each other without the cell phone and without the computers being the main interface. And now everything is done over the computer first. And the thing is, there's surveillance involved with in your cell phones and who you talk to on your email. And on a paranormal level, then we're not going too deep down that route. There's ways in which we can be interfered with, even today, without necessarily either party. You can think about email and social media, without either party being particularly malicious. You can have weird energy disrupting a friendship. It can also be something that happens to us as humans, technology aside, but technology clearly is something that's used for tracking, and that which surveils us is clearly beyond human. So this global surveillance network and other technologies, also think about 5G, and think about how a lot of people that talk about 5G don't talk also about the sun or the paranormal. It's like just this 5G thing, but there's so much more to take in if someone's going to go down that route of looking at the harmful effects of these technologies. 5G could be something that they are attempting to put out there to cause us to go into some sort of a sleep type trance, maybe add additional subliminals that are already there to cause some sort. Then there's the China element and China's agenda, because they're really pawns of the elite. So they're being used or will be used in the takeover of America. A lot of people believe this. Some people have visions of this, like Leon Magant and many others. I found many others with visions of this event without a specific year attributed to it, but I strongly suspect the mid 2020s, like 2025, will be a period of a lot of unrest. But before that, and now I'll mention Robin's Hood. Now, I don't think that he's nuts per se. He gets into stuff that I don't understand. So shout out to Robin's Hood. I'm not sure if he's a viewer. I watch some of his videos for entertainment purposes, but he hits on some deep stuff. So he and Esoteric Gypsy were both saying April at the same time, like within the last 24 hours. Others are also kind of, raising the alarm. CG, I think, is an opportunist. I think he sees stuff that's trending and he goes with it, but I'm not going to completely throw him out. When I initially found him, I thought that CG had a lot of potential. Maybe there is good in you, Jedi, but I think you got a lot of work to do personally. I hope you are watching CG. Brother from another mother, certainly in spirit. I always thought that we were all kind of like brothers in spirit, even if we argued and fought a little bit and were on different sides. I always thought deep down we were part of a soul group family. Even if some people may seem to be on the dark side, there is an essence to, I think, what a lot of people are talking about with the coming war and the solar. Unfortunately, there's ego involved and there's politics involved. So is that really going to help the people prepare for what's to come? Now, do you need that you don't currently have to survive 3 months? What do I need? Well, I need all my propane containers full. I need, and I'm welcoming your tips if you have any on great online deals for food, or some just go to the grocery store and buy a bunch of canned food. I've mentioned before you can get quinoa for cheaper on eBay. I'm looking for other recommendations. I'm not like a big fan of the MRE thing, but all of us should have at least a month's worth of food. And if someone's willing to adjust what it is that they eat, I don't think that it's that difficult to do. But a lot of people have particular eating habits. What about heating? Is there additional heating that someone needs? If someone is in a certain environment like this one, in certain grid down situations, it may be, especially if their car's not running, not feasible to get to town and get certain supplies. So several months worth of water, several months worth of food, several months worth of fuel, maybe several months worth of something else. And once we start getting to obsessing on whether or not we're going to get harmed or not, certain things may be beyond our control. And this is where I'll go outside the box and mention that, and I want to thank those of you that are watching tonight, 22 viewers. I think our record is 33. There may be times in which you could have died, but you didn't, and you realize that something intervened. So who's to say that we are not going to be blessed with that type of possibility in the future? Some of us may have gone most of our whole lives without health insurance, and yet we made it this far. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe a little dental work here and there. The point is, we are in a way inundated to be terrified of what's coming. And how do we know that there isn't going to be, excuse the language, but a lifting of the veil? And so when you look at a number of different things that are coming together in this conjuncture, I've always considered it possible if they were going to be manufacturing a conflict to attack human consciousness. What if the ultimate agenda was to create a massive situation? Now I'm kind of steering away from the solar event, but take a deep breath now. It seems like I'm jumping all over the map, but I'm not. It's like where X marks the spot. So we have an increase in solar flares or solar activities. We're going to come out of the minimum in solar cycle 24 into 25. And now all this geopolitical stuff is starting. And then China with the 5G and China with the moon. Why does China need to get to the moon for a particular strategic position? So we'll get more into geopolitics during another time, but there are these different stages of potentials. Of course, there could be more. A government stage shutdown, an actual solar event, and an EMP. And a staged shutdown, I think, would be a part of a possible agenda to take us into a dystopian, tyrannical government once they bring back the grid. And the ethno-state dystopia is something that I highly suspect. All the cards and the moves seem to be there. And maybe not to fully fulfill it, but to act in a way that makes the rest of the world very angry, especially if we have a series of events in which people are put into detainment facilities and the whole world's watching. That's not going to go over very well. And so as we see an increase in solar activity, even if the grid doesn't go out, we can easily see a rise in human aggression. And so when people talk about the crazy behavior from others, the zombie behavior, I directly see a correlation with these types of energies. I don't think that it's all spiritual. I'm not one of those typical new agers that describes all energy as just this enlightenment thing that's now going to take us to 5D. I don't understand why some of them sound so, and I'm trying to be polite, manic on the level of just automatically calling it enlightenment, because these strong energies that come through, I think, are energies that can also possess some people. Some people are not like responding to these energies. Think aurora borealis, because that's what I'm thinking of. And you look at the sky and how the sky appears in a certain way. Again, some people would rather that just be somebody pushing buttons somewhere instead of the actual effect of the geomagnetic storms. And so, like, those are signs, by the way, when we start seeing the aurora borealis in certain areas where we normally don't see it, where things are really changing. From the magnetics, and we know that magnetic north is moving. We know that the Earth's magnetic field is thinning. And we know that we are about to receive this additional solar radiation after this current cycle, as all these unnatural electromagnetic technologies are around us. And so it really does seem that we are being inundated with, not to mention cancer causing technologies, right? But we are inundated with so many technologies that are not native to our biology. And some of these technologies could be trying to aggravate some of your ancestor demons. And it is obvious to me that the technology today is being used, especially this warlike stuff, to aggravate racial tensions instead of heal them, instead of show people what's really going on, the real new world order, the real elite, the real less than 1%, if you will, right? A lot of people are being activated by manufactured news that is activating ancestral programming. It's programming for war. It's like trying to take us back to the dark ages. So my proposal is that we may be under severe mind control to be fearing the grid down situation, because the grid down situation on a totality level, I mean, we're talking worldwide. But by the way, if we just got hit though one part of the planet, that would give another nation state like China a massive military advantage. But it's also said that if we were to see a massive solar attack or a solar flare upon the planet, I've also heard it said that it would spread worldwide. and that it would, extreme ones could fry most electronics. And so one person was saying, well, we could have martial law and the government could come put us all in concentration camps after a solar flare. Well, if it's a massive solar flare that's disrupting electronics and those Humvees are not altered in a way to where they can still operate, then those Humvees aren't going to be going anywhere. And ultimately, do some people take some of these theories and fears to a level that during some moments may sound a little ridiculous? And I think the answer to that is yes. And so there is a place to be questioning what we're told. There is a place to be questioning the government's agenda, but we need to be rational with our mathematics. 2 plus 2 equals 4, not 5.7. So I think that we would see a massive decentralization, obviously, of the political structure. The massive decentralization that would be something that even could be remotely fair, would be something that would be equal across the planet. And if there were all these people talking to each other at once, I mean, not only would the energy of the planet change, the people would change, the engagements would change. People would be more able to survive if there was more community, and people would be bored enough. Literally, people would be looking for people to talk to because they would be going crazy without their devices. Because, I mean, you have a massive issue with digital addiction and the things that are on the feed that some people are addicted to a certain degree. I'm addicted to the internet because I don't have much of a social life because I moved off the grid to get away from things before things got really, really crazy. And now we're in a situation where most of the news and most of the YouTube commentators are talking about things getting really, really crazy and people feeling it and people seeing what's taking place in the political structure and people seeing what's taking place on the internet. And they're seeing that Facebook's not getting any better. They're seeing that relationships aren't getting any better. They're seeing that the gender warfare isn't being healed. People are realizing, maybe men like myself, that maybe after years and years of speaking from our heart about relationships, that it hasn't necessarily attracted a good women into our lives. And some of you that are women that may have YouTube channels that talk about relationships, if you're there, maybe you've experienced similar. The point is we've had all this opportunity to see the fruits of this technology. And my message to you is, let us not take this for granted. This is the opportunity to shine. This moment, not tomorrow. You know, like the guy training Rocky in Rocky 3. There is no tomorrow. Rocky's like, oh, tomorrow, man. Tomorrow we'll do it. Tomorrow we'll train. There is no tomorrow. There is only now. And there's a lot of programming that we've been under in this spell, in this world. Just put it off till tomorrow. Just put it off till tomorrow. And some of us are getting that intuitive hit. No, now. Now's the time we look for an additional job, or now's the job or time that we look to volunteer, or we go on a trip where we try to get some extra food. Now's the time in which we attempt to do those things. Not wait till 2020. Now's the time to start processing certain things or a lifetime of trauma. Like as these energies come in and we go through these shifts, which some people still don't even understand when I'm going in some of those directions. Some of you are. And I'm going to be working harder on continuing to go deeper down the rabbit hole with those few of you that are here. Those of you that do get it, thank you for the thumbs up. And it's okay if some of you don't get it, but a lot of people are getting it. And there is a split in consciousness. And I said this years ago, I cannot stop and wait for the rest of the people to catch up with regards to consciousness. As far as I'm concerned, everybody has had an opportunity to get online and find out if this stuff is real, that the sun is real. We are going through major changes, and the major changes that we are going through are all aligned. Like everything that I'm looking at is dealing with coming out of the solar minimum and going into solar max 25 and asking myself, how can it be a spiritual time? How can some of these heavy energies that exist in the dark of the woods also be used for good? Because we deal with this flux, like a flux, this flux of human energy and human creativity. And when these energies come in, and this is what some people think is quack, but it's real, we experience more of that flux. So some people may choose to go to war. Some people may be trying to experience enlightenment. It's a matter of choice. This is always, it's literally in the ebook that there's a choice in where you point your consciousness. Now, when I move back to Portland, this isn't going to be a long rant. No one talked to me about my solar flare ebook. Not one astrologer, not one spiritualist, no one, not one hippie. There's something about a disconnect between my own species and my content, except for a dozen of you. And I want you to understand this. And I'm looking for ways in which I can empower myself to reach more people and figure out what is limiting me from getting this very valuable information to people like George Noring. I don't have that type of audience that can provide that type of email blast. But whether someone's watching tonight or not, feel free to do that. That's not the ultimate goal. But I do honestly feel in my heart that a lot of people would spiritually benefit if they learn more about the changes in the sun beyond several points. Ultimate enlightenment and ultimate doom and gloom. Those are not the only two options. But again, going to the actual solar flare recent scenario, we would obviously see a die off of the population, and we would see worst case scenarios I don't need to verbalize. But left to our own devices and without the overt mind control technologies, would we be able to bring some sort of healing to ourselves and to others? Would our bodies adjust maybe to the new energies? I'm not going to go as far down a new age direction with the sun as opposed to if we were just simply to remove all of the noise. And this is all like Eastern teaching, empty your cup, just remove, right? We don't need to necessarily add all the stuff, just remove the noise and remove these manufactured events and all of these distractions, and then leave the what is. And left to our own devices, I believe that humans of different racial and ethnic and class and intellectual backgrounds would be less at war with each other. Technology